Hi, and welcome to another little session of Let's Learn About Science. Now, we can see here that the lesson today is about physical change or chemical change, and they're quite different, but I'm going to hopefully be able to help you distinguish between the two. So without further ado, let's get started. Let's remember what we already know. We already know that matter is made of particles, and it's all the stuff that's all around us. It's all of the dirt, it's all of the earth, it's all of the air, it's all of the water. All these things are what we call matter. And we've said that it's made up of particles, and the particles are generally called atoms. Now, we also know that matter is not the same. It varies in shape, size, colour, all sorts of things. But one important thing it varies in is a thing called its state or phase. Now, we commonly know those as solids, liquids and gases. And the best way to look at it is to think about water. We've got ice cubes and water. Obviously it's a warm day and the ice cubes are melting and forming water. Right? This is one way, a very, very common way for matter to change, and it goes from one form, the ice, to the water. So, this is what we would call a physical change, because the stuff that is changing is still the same, it's still water. So if we look at this one, I've made it a little bit easier for us to think about and also included some of the words we need to know. Right, we know we've got solid, and when we have a solid like ice, all the particles are really, really close together and they're really, really tightly arranged, and that means that ice has a shape. But as soon as we release it by melting it, and in this case the red arrows indicate that we're adding heat. The blue arrows indicate we're taking heat away. Alright, so we melt and we get that water, and we get all the particles. See all the little particles? They look like Mickey Mouse hats. They all are separated out. Here they're all joined together. So the particles here are going to be further apart. And that explains how we can have things dissolving, but that's another video. And then of course water can boil and form water vapour, or steam as we call it. Now this is a simple example of a physical change. So let's quantify this. Matter can change its form or state or phase. Solid, liquid, gas. They are forms, states or phase. They are quite often used in different ways, so I want you to remember these other words as well. So we can talk about the state of matter, which is solid, liquid and gas, or the phase. And that's also solid, liquid and gas. Right, let's move on. The important part here is the fact that all of these are solid water, liquid water, gas water. And that means that the chemical itself is still water, it's just in a different form. And this is a typical thing of a physical change. And as I said before, we can see the arrows. The red arrow means we're adding energy, the blue arrow means we're taking energy out. And in this form, the energy we're taking and adding and removing is heat energy. Right, a chemical change is different because not only can we change the way it looks, but we also get there and change the matter itself. Now remember we said we had these particles? Right, the particles are rearranged. That means they take on different shapes and different forms. And that causes other things to happen. But it also means that we don't have the same stuff we started with. So we've made something new. Now, we have a problem with this because if we make something new, It's different from what we started with in the way it acts and the way it looks. So we've got to be very, very careful. Sometimes, but not all times, we can make it go back to the starting point. Whereas in a physical change, we just do that. It's very, very easy to change it and get the parts are there. So what do we look for if we have a chemical change? Well, we saw that a physical change is often just a change of the way it looks, its state or its phase. So let's look at this. So chemical change can also be a change in state or phase. That's okay, but can change colour. Now with a chemical change, it's more likely that more of these things are going to happen than just the one. Sometimes we get bubbles, and if we get bubbles, we know that a gas is being made. So the gas is part of what's going on, and sometimes the chemical releases heat energy or absorbs heat energy. If it releases heat energy, we feel it as it's getting hotter. If it absorbs heat energy, it feels like it's getting colder. Right, let's summarise that. So if we've got a physical change, do we change the phase or state? Yes. Is it reversible? Normally yes, by adding or removing heat or energy. And is something new made? The answer to that is always no. The chemical part of it is still the same. A chemical change, though, can change phase, but it doesn't have to. In other words, it can start with a solid and still be a solid. It can start with a solid and be a gas, just like a physical change, but it doesn't have to. Now, is it reversible? Can I go back to what I've started with easily? And the answer to that is no, not always. Sometimes it's impossible, but that's another story. Now, do we make something new with a chemical change? And the answer to that is a very, very strong always. And I hope that is going to help us better understand what is going on.